Tommy can address some of that. But anyway, I've been knowing Tommy long. I just met him this past year. And but I've grown to really respect the man, because when you understand what he did and what he sacrificed, you'll respect him too. Right now, he has an action against the 4 IRS agents and filed criminal charges against them. You know why? Because they violated the law and ruined his law practice. They went around scaring all his clients and running them off to where he was destitute, looking for money to even live, and they didn't want him to fight back. But thank God that the man, blessed by God, was able to explain to a jury why he was not guilty, and that they acquitted him on July 9th of this past year. And that was a blow that the government couldn't stand. That was a blow that really set them back. And they, right now, I know what this man's doing now. He's giving more for his country. At his own expense, he's traveling around helping people who are the government's going after, preparing them so they too can win in court, showing them how to do it. And I know it's costing him, and he's working with Larry Beecraft, and I know what Larry Beecraft has given to this movement. I've known Larry a lot of years. So I've grown to really respect these men, and the rest of it I'll just let him talk for himself. Okay, Tommy, you take it over.
All right. Thank you, John. Give me a tall order to stand up to, but to start out with on this thing, we're talking about major sacrifice. I didn't sacrifice anything. Somebody took something. Sacrifice is when you give up something. It's theft whenever somebody takes it. What was taken from me was an awful lot, and what was given in return is an awful lot too. I lost my practice that I spent the last 35 years for. I still have the respect of my clients. I still have the trust of my clients. I've got clients that the first time I ever met them, or saw them, I didn't meet them, was in a box in a hospital nursery. And 25 years later, I'm getting them out of a bad marriage, or I'm getting them into a good adoption, or I'm handling their grandfather's succession for them and laying his affairs to rest. So, all of these things that were so rewarding to me over those 30 years, all these people that meant so much to me, and I miss them dearly. They still respect me. They still trust me. They still want the best for me, but they're frightened. They're scared to death of me. They think that at any moment, a 20 megaton explosion is going to go off, and they better stay out of range. The government shipped out, no telling how many, and we're in the process of finding out now, but we know of at least 29, probably about 50 that we suspect, but based upon other indications, probably more like 200 or 300. It's letters leaking to people that I was under the DOJ criminal investigation, that leaking a super secret, like what was it in Animal House, a double super secret probation, and the grand jury is a double super secret process. It's supposed to be secret. But they leaked it out in writing to probably hundreds of people. And all of a sudden I became poison. Everywhere. I mean, no matter where I went, everybody just disappeared. And I didn't really know why. Several of my clients and several friends had called me and told me, hey, IRS guy came by and talked to me about you today. What did he say? He asked me if I had written this check for $10. Well, it was $40. I was in a little investment club, and I got the subscription to this investment newsletter on the internet, and I paid for it, and they reimbursed me. So that was what that was. So they inquired into that. They dug into my dry cleaning bill. But they didn't tell me that they told them, hey, He's under criminal investigation by the Department of Justice. He's under criminal investigation by a grand jury. And anybody who gets too close to him could get caught up in a criminal investigation, federal case. And that just terrifies them. How many people in here are afraid of the IRS? How many people are lying about that? I'm terrified of those guys. I'm terrified of those guys. But, there's somebody that's a lot more terrifying to me. Not terrifying in a way that they're evil or bad or sinister, but in a way that, when I answer the IRS, I answer this month, I answer next month, I answer maybe next year, maybe even 5 years. When I answer to the government, I answer the same way. But 35 years ago, I raised my right hand, and I swore to uphold the law and the Constitution of the United States of America and the state of Louisiana. And I didn't make that oath to my second cousin. I didn't make that oath to the government. I made it to a much higher authority. And payback to that authority isn't for a month, and it's not for 5 years. Payback to that authority is for eternity. I couldn't go back on a debt like that. I got an email from a guy today, and what caused me to think about that, I get a lot of emails in every day. I got an email from a fellow today that said, "Thank you for keeping your oath to us." And I wrote him back, I said, "Well, I'm sorry to have to correct you on such a wonderful, kind note." And it seemed, like I'm not grateful for it, but I didn't take an oath to you. I took an oath to, I might have broken an oath to you. I might have gone back on that before I took on the IRS. I don't know if I would have, I've never been tested like that. But I sure as heck wasn't going to go back on an oath to him. And so the die was cast. There was never a question in my mind from the time I first learned about this by accident to the time that I found myself in a witness chair being tried as a defendant, not as an attorney down there on the table. And believe me, as many times as I've been in that courtroom, it never looked like that before. It looked like a totally different room I had never been in before in my life. But I asked John, what do you want me to talk about? I'm up here to help him out with this thing if I can. As he pointed out to you, the gag order went into effect on Tuesday at midnight. And even before it went into effect, the government had issued a notice that it wanted to depose him to see if he's violating this order. I mean, it hadn't even gone into effect, and they're ordering him with a subpoena to come in and say, "Now this is pure harassment. This is pure grind the guy down." And excuse my French, but my answer to grinding the guy down tactics is non-illegitimate carborundum, which is Latin for don't let illegitimate people grind you down. Is that better? Because I know there's two of them are asleep. Don't let those illegitimate people grind you down. They've heard worse. And so, they're going to grind him down is what they're out to do. And so here they are. They're right out of the chute. I mean, the order hadn't even gone into effect. And they're saying, you've got to show up in Greenbelt, Maryland and be deposed on such and such a date and such a time. I asked him, I said, you mind if he participates by phone? It's just an accommodation. We do that all the time. Lawyers do it all the time. And this guy came back with a vengeance. No, this guy's he name calling a whole 9 yards, and it was like, there's nobody more dangerous than John Kottmeyer. Now, maybe if I were the government, maybe I'd see it that way too. Because there's nobody who I have more hope or faith than John Kottmeyer. So if I were on the other side, it'd be probably nobody I'd have more fear of than John Kottmeyer. Anybody who can show his dedication and show that the amount of effort that he's willing to put forth, the risk that he's willing to take, is a dangerous man. They say the most dangerous man in the world is a man that's got nothing to lose. I say the most dangerous man in the world is a man that's willing to lose everything. Because a guy with nothing to lose has got nothing to fight with. But a man who's willing to lose everything will fight with everything he's got. He's more dangerous to me. We need some dangerous people. We need some people that'll stand up for the truth. Now, a couple of areas I asked John, what do you want me to talk? He said, talk about your case. Talk about, truth attack. Talk about the radio network. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to pop out a couple of things about all three. And then we'll go to a Q&A session in a second, and you'll tell me what you want to talk about. First off, in my case, for those of you who aren't aware, I was indicted in October of 2006, 2 counts of evasion. Those 2 counts, evasion requires an act of evasion, not an omission. A failure to file is not an act of evasion. It has to be doing something. They said my act was hiding income in 2 brokerage accounts belonging to a trust I had established. Now, I don't know how many of you know about the trust gimmicks and whatnot that are floating around, but if you do know anything about those, you know that the trust has to be administered by a trustee that's totally independent, not under your control. It has to be irrevocable. And, all of these limitations. This trust was revocable. I was the trustee. Certainly isn't somebody independent, is it? I named as my successor trustee A.G. Edwards. If I'm going to really cheat, I'm going to turn this over to a brokerage house as my next successor to keep up the cheating, right? I am a beneficiary along with my wife. Now, none of this operates as a trust that would separate income. It had nothing to do with income, and they knew it. My wife, who was disabled at the time, she had suffered brain damage, severe brain damage from an aneurysm, was totally dependent upon me. I'm from a family where I'm already 3 years past par for a crier male. I'm not done yet, the doctor said. I was supposed to die at 45 with a widowmaker, and they don't understand why I wouldn't die. They waited, and they waited, and I wouldn't die. Finally, they said, get up, go home. But all 3 doctors told me there was something that you're here for. You better find it. Something you're here for, because I can't explain why you didn't die. It didn't cut anything off the bill, since they... But, here I am. I'm running late, and my wife is dependent on me, and she's got a son that every time you see him come around, you see the fin. She's got one of these sons that, and everybody knows somebody else who has a son like that. None of us have one. She had a son like that, and it was always sniffing for blood in the water. And if there was any money to be had, he got it from her, and that she could never tell him no. And in her brain damaged state, as bright as she was, as positive as she was, as wonderful as she was, she could never tell this boy no. He'd have had her pushing a shopping cart before the grass was grown over my grave. So I set up this trust way back, 91, way back before I had any idea there was a problem with the income tax, other than the fact that it was a problem. So, they knew that this was cooked up. The funny part about it, or the part that isn't so funny, is how cooked up. And that's part of the criminal complaint I just filed. And that's part of what the Treasury Inspector General is really digging into. They came down from Little Rock, interviewed me. They're really concerned about this one. Perjury. Somebody had to walk in to that grand jury room and tell that grand jury under oath that I had income in that trust. The 2 years in question, that I had income in that trust for those 2 years and used it to hide. That trust, those brokerage accounts lost these are, remember 2000, 2001, the Clinton recession, when finally the brakes of the higher taxes kind of kicked in and shut the economy down, and then all of a sudden the market went crazy for several years. Well, that was 2000 and 2001. And whenever that happened, the first year, those accounts lost $8,000. Second year, those accounts lost $12,000. There was virtually nothing left. Now, somebody didn't do his homework, did they? Well, there are three answers to a question. Yes, no, and I don't know. And if one of them is true, the other two are false. And if the answer is I don't know, then yes or no. Either one would have been a lie, would have been perjury. Somebody committed perjury in that grand jury proceeding. And I called them on it. And I put together, I wish I'd brought it with me, I could have showed it off. It really was pretty. Spiral book, bound book, 150 pages or so. The last 75 pages or so were actual signed confessions, I call them, letters and memoranda of interview. These guys would go out and violate the law. That's a felony. When you disclose information you don't have to about a taxpayer, that is a felony. 5 years and mandatory termination. 5 years and mandatory termination. So whenever you get somebody going out doing these things and they do it verbally and then come back to the office and they write out or type out, I went over to Mr. Jones's house and I told him Mr. Cryer was being investigated by the Department of Justice for criminal, issues, and that there was a criminal grand jury investigation of Mr. Cryer being conducted. I committed this felony, and then I went over there and I committed that felony and signed special agent, very special agent, so-and-so. That's what they do. Now, if I didn't hide of arrogance, I don't know what it is. But they sure got called on it.
Are they not allowed to do that?
No, they're not allowed to do that. They're not allowed to give out any information that isn't necessary in order to obtain, and they certainly can't talk about what other agencies are doing. Any information that comes to them. And on top of that, the grand jury proceeding is, like I said, double super secret probation type secret. The grand jury proceeding is sacrosanct. That is the holy of holies in the legal system. Nobody talks about what goes on in that grand jury room. And that's very, very serious. It's also a violation of the Federal Rules of Criminal Procedure. And I wrote down on this thing all of these infractions. I've even put them in the form of an indictment so that they can copy it and get this one right. And 58 counts, felony counts against 4 agents. 44 of them against 1. And this was a guy who stomped out of the courtroom whenever they said not guilty with his head down. Really a very, very unhappy puppy. So 2 weeks later, I sent that out, Treasury Inspector General, the Commissioner of the Internal Revenue Service, Secretary of Treasury, both of my senators, my congressman, the Taxpayer Advocacy Office, the FBI New Orleans Field Office. And, of course, the original went to the guy who prosecuted me, and another copy to his boss, and another copy to the Attorney General. This book, when it went out, it's almost a bestseller in one day. So, all of a sudden now, there's a lot of interest coming through. Now, I don't know what they're going to do over there in the federal building about these charges, and I don't expect them to do anything, but I did demand that they prosecute these people. I told the Assistant U.S. Attorney, you and I are both sworn to the same law, and we don't have a right to pick and choose which laws we will favor and which laws we will neglect. All of the law is just as important as all of the other law. And if you don't keep the law, period, you're not keeping the law. So I've heard nothing back from over there. But a few weeks later, I filed a suit then. Now, here's one of the things I want to talk about. And this is where we're getting into truth attack, and some of this is going to dovetail over. We're going to have some overlap here, and that's okay. Because none of this stuff is happening independent of everything else. No cause is an island. We're all attached at the hip. And if we all sink, we all drown. If we all swim, we all make it. And that's part of the problem that I see with the movement when I came into it last year. I didn't know there was a tax honesty movement. When I came into it last year, how fragmented it was, how disorganized it was, how working against each other it was. And most of all, how defensive it was. There was no offense. There was no plan of attack. So I proposed truth attack to the groups. And we met in Washington, D.C. at the end of March last year, just about a week before my trial was scheduled. And I proposed truth attack to them. And there are 2 fronts that truth attack opens up. And I said, this is what you need to do. You need to get a unified voice. And here are these folks. We had Steve Hempling, we had Motaheda, we had Joe Bannister, we had Bob Schultz, we had Fred Smart, we had people from all over, we had several others I can't remember. And I said, here's the plan. I handed it out. Because I'd found out 3 days earlier that I was supposed to present them with a plan at this conference in Washington, D.C. I didn't know I was supposed to do that. I was just telling them, get yourselves together. Get on the same page. Grow up. You know? And then I find out, Tom Cryer's going to have a plan of attack for us here. So I said, I better get a plan of attack together. So I pulled an all-nighter just before we left and went up to Washington. And I rattled out about a 9,500-page book. Went and had copies made. I hauled them up there and I passed them out. Truth attack. And the truth attack is based on two basic principles. Number one is that people need to stick together. Have one voice. Not be out shouting all kinds. If everybody here started saying their name at the same time, I wouldn't get one name out of that. Not one time. Not one name would I get out of that. I'd hear, however many there are here, but I wouldn't understand any of them. So if we talk the same way, then, so I said this message got to meet certain requirements, because we're dealing with the general public. That general public, okay? The one that used to have an 8th grade education on average and now it has a 3rd grade education on average. That general public. It has to be easily stated. It has to be obviously true, what lawyers call self-evident. And it has to be irrefutable. So I picked 3 messages. The number 1 message and the backups. Okay? First message. There is no law making the typical working American liable for an income tax. Anybody here didn't know that? Well, everybody out there doesn't. Second message. What you bring in is gross receipts, not income. Is there any profit in that? Did you give nothing for it? If you gave nothing in exchange for it, then it's profit, and that makes it income. How many people here get a paycheck for nothing? Even lawyers don't get a paycheck for nothing. We put something into it, right? So how can it be 100% profit? Somebody's telling you a lie. And third, did you know that you have a God-given, not government-granted, a God-given right to earn a living through your own labor by your chosen lawful occupation? Just as much as you have a right to free speech, with exceptions. Maybe your speaking is fire at the theater. You know what? Let's start a fire. We won't say it. We'll just start the fire. All right. And then you've got this right. Now, whenever you exercise a right, that is not a privileged activity. Guess what an excise tax is? An income tax, according to the Supreme Court, is an excise tax, right? It's an indirect tax. An indirect tax is a tax on privileged activities, right? Everybody knew that. Everybody out there doesn't know that. But when you do something because you have a right to, that was granted to you by a higher authority, how can this lower authority charge you for that, quote, privilege? That's exactly what the Supreme Court told this state in 1819 when it said, no, Maryland, you cannot tax the national bank because it was created by a higher supreme authority, another sovereignty, and what one sovereignty has the right to create, another sovereignty cannot have the right to destroy. And the power to tax is the power to destroy, right? So, they can't tax your right. That came from another sovereignty, didn't it? They can't tax your rights. They can't tax your freedom of speech. They can't tax you going to church. They cannot tax your fundamental rights. And when you go to work in the morning, or at midnight if you're graveyard, when you go to work, you're exercising your God-given right to earn a living, to provide for yourself and your family, to better yourself. to make yourself happy by providing a happy standard of living to you and those you love. That's called the pursuit of happiness. And the Supreme Court has said that this constitutes the greatest part of that right to the pursuit of happiness. Because if you're not free to earn a living by any way that you choose, and you're not free in your labor, and you don't own yourself anymore, then you cannot be considered to be a free man, and you cannot be considered to be enjoying the freedoms that God gave us the moment that we opened our eyes. And by some, I think the moment that we couldn't even have eyes, that we were a two-celled organism, as I was once called a while back. And I wrote that back in a letter to the editor. As a former two-celled organism, I'm grateful that my parents chose not to kill me. But nonetheless, that's this idea of no offense was concerning to me. And I said, this is your offense. You've got to make people know these three things. They don't have to believe them. They don't have to understand them. They just have to know about them. If you're on a jury and you're going to try a man for disagreeing with the government, and you believe the government might be wrong, are you going to convict him? No way. No way. Well, you won't be able to see the jury that'll convict a man for disagreeing with the government, whatever. Everybody knows the government is wrong. Right now, everybody knows that the earth is flat. Right? Except us. We think it's round. But everybody knows it's flat. It's I'm taking that into account. These are the truth attack messages. These are not, by the way, the messages of John Kottmeyer, who's just sitting here listening. All right? And they're not the messages of Save a Patriot. He's asked me to speak for Truth Attack, and that's the only one I'm speaking for. He just passed me a note. You put me in jail. I'll send you candy bars and cigarettes. Did you bring your toothbrush? I almost made a client pass out like that one time. He asked him if he brought his toothbrush. But the deal about the Truth Attack that came up was that everybody there was all for it, but nobody wanted to start it. So while I was there, I get the message, trial's been upset. The government wanted a continuance, so there isn't going to be a continuance. They don't want to try it just before tax day after all. So here we got extra time. Gary Thomason has agreed to ride up there to keep me from falling asleep and driving in the ditch, because when I decided to go, it was too late to fly. And coming back, we decided, well, if nobody else wants to start this, we'll start it. They all said they'd support it, and they have. And Save a Patriot has come in as a sponsor of Truth Attack and encouraged people to participate and support it. But Truth Attack has got two major fronts that we're mounting. And this time it's going to be some fun stuff this year. We're just getting our feet wet. We were only launched last April. And we're just getting, started getting organized. And what basically we're doing is opening up two fronts. One is that we're opening up a public front where we're taking the Truth Attack message out. And we've already got over 6,000 or 7,000 Truth Troopers enlisted. People who have put their names, addresses, phone numbers down the line so that we know how to get them, how to get in touch with them. These are people who are dedicated. They're not hiding behind an anonymous email. They're standing up and saying, count me. I'm in. They're in every state in the union. They're forming up in groups, in neighborhood groups. And I'd like to think that there are some Truth Troopers in here that have already started their neighborhood group. Any Truth Troopers in here? Well, I'd sure like to see that. There's one. I'd like to see that number change in the next 24 hours. All you have to do is go to www.truthattack.org, click Enlist, fill it in, and say, count me in. And what we're doing is that this April is going to be fun. Operation Stop Thief. The announcement, you guys are getting a little bit of a sneak peek at this. When I get back, it's already ready to launch, ready to go. When I get back, the announcement's going out to all the Truth Troopers that Operation Stop Thief is scheduled for April 15. Get your groups together. Tax day, this is the first April 15 I've ever really looked forward to. These groups, these neighborhood groups, getting together, and some of them are already starting to meet. We're getting feedback from them, and they're getting excited. They know something's in the pipeline. They don't know what it is. I've told them all to get organized. We're going to have some fun. Each of those groups is going to get packages for every post office they can cover. 3 signs, printed material, detailed instructions, caveats, what to watch out for, what not to do, what to do. And on April 15, you know how every April 15 you got late filers. Well, they're not late filers because they're procrastinators. Maybe some are, but most of them are late filers because they're having to write a check. The blood's still wet, still stinging, or still stinging. You know, and so here they are lined up at the post office. There's a guy out there taking one return, putting them in the big bin, and they're driving through. News crews are always there to, to do a special little report, and the news crew's going out there. Hell yeah, here we go again. Got to go film the tax filers, yada. And they get there, and 3 or 4 guys are standing out on the street waving at the people going by with big signs saying, "What income tax? Truthotax.org." And people are standing over here where the line's coming in, or the line's going out of the post office, and handing them flyers saying, "You've just been robbed. Go to truthtech.org and find out how and why." Now, what better people to tell than those? What better time to tell than those? And what do you think that news crew is going to do when it gets there and it sees this commotion going on? At the local level, they won't, because they don't know. They didn't get the memo. On the national level, try to get that on national news. Yeah, you're absolutely right. There's a blackout on this issue. But RCA and GE don't control the local stations. And that decision's being made that very night. There's no time to run anything upstairs and get an approval on it. They do it. A lot of those are going to get through. A lot of those are going to get out. People are going to be going to truthtech.org and finding out the truth. There's a lot of material there. The other front, and that's where I was talking about this suit that I filed. 7431. Every one of you in this room has the same rights I do. Everyone in this town has the same rights I do. Everyone in this country has the same rights I do, except for John. John doesn't have the right to speak his mind about taxes. Okay, but all the rest of us do. And one of the rights that all of us have is that when the government violates the law, the law also gives us a remedy. Now, the remedy, when the government violates the law the way that these agents violated the law and damaged me, gives me a right to sue the government. I can't sue them, but I can sue the government for the damages that they caused. And the damages on this, I don't even have to prove damages. $1,000 minimum on each one. When I prove more, then I get more, plus punitive damages if it exceeds that, plus attorney's fees, plus costs. Now, what they did to me was not a unique thing. These letters I'm talking about are form letters. They're written out on everybody that they're investigating. If they're investigating somebody, they send these letters out to your clients, your customers, your friends. And if any of you are under investigation, don't raise your hand. Any of you are under investigation, ask around if anybody's heard from them or received any letters. And if you do, get them. Because every one of those is a $1,000 bill. If I told you there's a $1,000 bill on the floor back there, nobody would just get up and walk off and not look at it or see it or pick it up. Well, that's what's happening every day when the government violates its laws, day after day after day. They're giving us all this ammunition, and we don't know how to load it, lock it, and fire it. So Truth Attack is going to be issuing an information campaign to let people know in the community, because they're the ones that would be the ones that are the targets of this and the victims of these crimes, that you may be entitled to compensation. You may be entitled to hold the government accountable. And maybe it's your time to tell them, I'm about to assess you. I'm giving you a notice of deficiency. Your conduct was deficient. And your pocketbook's about to become deficient because of that. I'm holding you to the law. And when you start holding the government to the law in these little ones, what they consider little, until it starts stacking up, because our goal is to just to field 1,000 of these suits in 2008. 1,000 of these suits, do the math, in 2008. And it's nothing but headshot cases, nothing but summary judgment cases, a term you're very familiar with. When that happens, another thing's going to happen. The ripples just keep going out. When that happens, there's also another impact. And the law provides that when there's a judicial finding or an administrative finding, whether by a judge or by the Treasury Inspector General, that an agent or an employee has violated one of these laws, it's mandatory termination. Not policy. Policy can be waived. The law can't. And when these IRS agents see the hot dog of the office, the real hero, the Dirty Harry who goes out and pistol whips little old ladies and drags orphans and widows out of their homes and throws them into the street, and they respect him for this admirable conduct on behalf of his country, and they see this guy cleaning out his desk 2 years short of retirement, no unemployment because it's for cause, no severance package, no benefits. He's cleaning out his desk. He's gone. It's going to make them wonder, maybe I ought to check the law before I do stuff. You know, because I don't want to be him. Not anymore, I don't. Yesterday I wanted to be him, but not today. Maybe I better start checking the law. And if you can start a habit of getting government officials to follow the law, that's not a bad thing. Because really what we're trying to do is get them to follow the law on the big things, like who's liable for the income tax, like what is income, like what is taxable, what isn't taxable by the federal government. Now, let's talk about another thing here, the impact of these things. Because one of the things that this political side of it's going to do is it's going to make people more bold. It's going to make people more confident because they're learning that the government's wrong and I'm right. It's going to make them more aware of the fact that the government could be wrong, could be lying to me again. It's also going to make the government pull their horns in. Now, where's the tide going to go? You got the horns getting pulled in, and you got growing strength. Which way is the tide going to start rolling now? Right, to the law, to the Constitution. And as that tide grows, more people get exposed. The bigger the ball, the more people it touches. And eventually it hits critical mass. It's the same thing that happened in every single change. Every single social and legal change that's ever occurred in the history of man has followed that process. Somebody has to propound the issue. That's what Truth Attack is doing. Somebody has to stimulate public discussion. That's what Truth Attack is doing. That will then form a consensus which turns into public opinion, which then drives what? Politicians. Politicians then invoke change. Look at the Civil Rights Movement, followed that very same thing. Abolition movement followed that very same thing. Prohibition and anti-prohibition, both of those movements follow the same process. Prohibition, the killing effect was the fact that they got to where they could no longer get convictions for violations. Juries started refusing to convict people. So what's Truth Attack about out there telling people? We're going to be doing, if we can get the funding, we're going to be doing robocalls to the districts at every trial coming up. Robocalls where every registered voter in that deal gets a phone call saying, excuse me, but there's a very important message from Truth Attack. Please, you are aware that so-and-so and so-and-so and so-and-so and so, thank you for your time and for listening to this message. Please go to truthtech.org and learn more. Click. Okay. Now, if every registered voter in there gets a phone call, about 2 cents a piece, and it tells them that. A lot of them aren't going to listen. A lot of them are going to be click, click. A lot of them are going to get up, it's an answer machine going to get dumped. But a lot of them aren't, too. And all you need is one of them on a jury.
You need to proceed it by say, this is not, we're not trying to sell you anything or get you windows or anything else like that. We just have this to tell you.
I was thinking more like selling siding. So, at any rate, that's, if all you need is one, though, on that jury, and you don't get a conviction. We got a hung jury last week. Larry Beecraft and I did. I'm taking credit partly, but he was there the whole time. I'm taking credit partly because it's a process he and I are developing for defending people and getting acquittals. And I'm going to talk a little bit about it. I'm not going to tip the hand, but I do want to talk about it because I want people to understand what it takes whenever you decide to take this fight on. A lot of people, everybody wants to grab the spear, and they all want to go out and kill the beast before it gets the mama and kids. Okay, and that's honorable. But not everybody's geared for that fight. So you understand that whenever you get this, you're going to have to be willing to put it all on the line. And you're going to have to be willing to do what it takes to be a good defendant. I don't care how good a lawyer is. All he can do is give you a platform in these cases. He can give you a platform and he can protect it. He can run interference for you and keep people from knocking you off of it long enough for you to give your story. Long enough for you to tell the jury and make your case to them. He cannot get up there with you and tell your story. He cannot get up there and articulate your beliefs. He cannot get up there and explain why you believe what you believe and how you came to believe that. And he cannot get up there and whisper in your ear when that DA is pounding you about the head and shoulders and making you defend each and every word of it. You've got to be prepared. What separates the winners from the losers in tax cases is not so much the facts, because the facts, it's all in the mind. It's a mind crime. If you had one belief, you're guilty. If you had another belief, you're innocent. So where's the crime? You haven't done something. You haven't done something. So what makes a crime is what's in your head. The entire case is between that defendant's ears. And if it can't get from between his ears and out of his mouth and into the hearts and minds of that jury, he's guilty. So where is the crux of this case? Not with the lawyer, but with the guy running the ball. I mentioned earlier, I think I compared it to, the lawyer can get you to the 20-yard line. He can get you to the red zone. But once he gets you to the red zone, you've got to put your head down and you've got to get it to the goal line. It's up to the defendant to be acquitted or not acquitted. And so in order for us to get ahead on this, John, he characterized my win as being a big blow to the government. Why not 100 blows? Why not 1,000? Why not every one from now on? Why not deny them the convictions the same way that they were denied in Prohibition time? And it's going to take two things. One, re-educating the public so that the juries say, no, I'm not going to convict that man for disagreeing with the government that might be lying to me again. Right? The other side is to get that defendant to the point to where he can, make his case. Because a lawyer cannot climb up in his lap and make his case for him. It's going to be totally up to him. And briefly, because I can't get into too much detail on this, because otherwise it's so classified, I'd have to kill all of y'all, and I'd hate to do that. What we're doing is playing a tag team. I go in and I evaluate the case. I evaluate the client. We both evaluate the client. Larry and I both meet with him. We determine whether or not he's articulate enough, whether he's bright enough, whether he's a good candidate for a kill. Is he pleasant enough? Does he have too much stuff on his shoes? You know, has he been playing with things that he shouldn't be playing with, like the UCC stuff or the yellow fringe on the flag stuff, another what I call the tinfoil hat brigade? Is he got too much baggage? Can he pull this off? Will he work for it? And if we think that we've got a good candidate, we think we've got a guy who can win, we got a guy that can put his head down and get through that red zone and get to the end zone, then I go in and I evaluate the case. I go through all the materials with the guy. I identify what his beliefs are, being careful not to break any of them, even if they're wrong. A belief is a belief. Remember, it's all here. He doesn't have to be right. And I put together all the exhibits that are required. I put together this man's speech. I lecture him. I tutor him. I give him all the materials in order to understand his beliefs better. Because if you can understand them, then you can defend them. And then we work out how to take those pearls that we've all assembled and put them on a string that's called a story. If you just tell people fact, 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 you might as well be reading them a phone book. But if you make it a story, that jury will listen to it to the bitter end just to find out how it ends. Even though they know it ended with you sitting in the witness chair, they'll still listen to find out how it happened that way. So we put all this together, outlines, exhibits, ties, cross-references back and forth, a plan, a strategy, and tactics employed for the trial, outline cross-examination shots on these particular issues. Larry comes in, we work together on that. We work together on polishing up the client. Takes a couple of 3 months. We work together at the last minute on getting him polished, ready to go into court. And then I hightail it. I'm out of there. My work there is done. Let's go, Tonto. And Larry becomes the Lone Ranger, and he goes into court and he tries the case. Our first case, we've only had one that we've taken to fruition. Last week, hung jury. And this guy had a lot of stuff on his shoes. And this guy had a lot of dirt that they brought in on him about his personal life that had nothing to do with Texas. And this guy was what in Hawaii they call a Howie. Anybody know what a Howie is? It's a guy from over here that goes over there. It's kind of like what we call the difference between a Yankee and a damn Yankee from where I am. A Yankee is somebody from up north, that comes down there to visit. And a damn Yankee is somebody from up north that comes down there to visit but stays. And boy, we have a lot of them, including my best friend, who is from Springfield, Illinois. But that's what it's going to take. It's that kind of effort it's going to take on the legal side to start getting more of these acquittals. And whenever you get to where the government can't bite you because it has no teeth, then all that he can stand there and say, but Your Honor, I got no teeth. That's it. Who's going to be afraid of it? Toto just pulled the curtain back. Pay no attention to the old man behind the counter, right? Or behind the curtain. It's all a fraud. It's all a shill. It's all a sham. It's fantasy. But they're using that fantasy to send people to prison. So that's why Truth Attack is going important. Now, why is Liberty Radio so important to Truth Attack? What the first mission of Truth Attack is to alter public perception of reality. Tough thing to do when everybody knows the earth is flat. They burn people at the stake for saying otherwise. Put them in prison. So Liberty Radio, Liberty Works Radio, is the voice that's needed. The voices that we have now are the voices of truth troopers across the country, telling their family members, telling their co-workers, telling their neighbors, telling the people at church, telling the guy at the barbershop, telling the old lady at the car wash about the truth. And believe me, it flies around. I did an experiment a while back. I took an old joke, and I'm not going to tell the joke, but I took an old joke that hadn't been told in 30 or 40 years. And I told the joke to 3 different people, none of whom knew the other. Within 7 days, I heard it back from somebody that didn't know either of them. Word travels, especially if it's something that's provocative, like that dirty joke I told. So, if a joke can get around, the truth can get around too. It just needs to be done in a provocative way. Like, the government's lying. How many people bought the Bush lied thing? Probably a lot of folks here. Good intelligence, bad intelligence, lie, who cares? It was wrong. How do you fix it? I don't even care to fix the blame on the tax fraud. I just want them to stop doing it. And we can do it that way with Truth Attack. We can do it that way with Liberty Works Radio Network. This network would give not only this issue a voice, but all of the others. Look at the Fed. Look at the issues of what the federal government can and can't do. It's going to take a lot to get that monster back in the box. I took a while back preparing for how do you fight back, because people say, oh well, nobody, how do you pay for it? I had one idiot. I'm sorry. I had one lady ask me, but Mr. Cryer, what about my garbage pickup if I don't pay federal income tax? And what I wanted to say to her was, you idiot, you know. But you got to remember, these people are at third grade level now. They've been dumbed down by 30 or 40 years of federally managed educational systems. And this lady obviously was not homeschooled. All right, so, you know, here we are. So I was trying to be gracious, and I explained to her, look, federal taxes have nothing to do with your garbage pickup. They don't have anything to do with the street that goes in front of your house. They don't have anything to do, supposedly, with a school that your kids go to, or the one that I guess you went to. They also, you know, they don't have anything to do with all these issues. As a matter of fact, if you were to take the budget and the Constitution and set them side by side and connect the lines, you know, draw the lines, you could see those in school, you know, connect the two, right? You draw lines and test. They still have those? You know, like connect green to green. And so this was what I played the game, just like that one. But lo and behold, there were all these segments over here, these department heads, and I couldn't find any place to connect them to over here in Article 1, you know, Section 8, or any of the enabling clauses of the constitutional amendments. I mean, I looked all over. I couldn't find any way to connect Department of Education to anything. Can you? I couldn't find a way to connect Department of Agriculture to anything. Can you? Are you going to tell us how to grow our victory gardens? You're going to tell us, you know, how much our cows can belch? Global warming, you know, it's what's the federal government got to do with any of that? Look at what they've got powers to do. You know, I did took those things that I couldn't find a power to do, just department heads. Now inside, you know, there's got to be a lot more down underneath the skin, but just on the top, the department heads themselves. And I moved them into a third column. Totaled them up. Anybody want to take a guess? No, what percentage of the budget I added up on things that the government hadn't got any business spending in the first place? Not quite, but if you drill down, you might get to that. 56% of the federal budget. Now, the personal income tax accounts for what, about 30% of the revenues? I'm not far off. And if you could, you know, you got 30% of the revenues, that's going to mean that they might have to stop doing what they're not supposed to have been started doing in the first place. Isn't it going to be easier if they don't have the money for a Department of Education to tell them to close down that Department of Education and get out of my schools, get out of my town? Isn't it going to be easier to tell them, hey, leave my farmers alone? Thank you very much. Well, every little thing they take, they give a little tidbit back for. You know, here's your peppermint. I'm going to give you price supports, but I'm going to tell you how to run your farms. I don't know. I knew a farmer one time that said, yeah, I know about all the price support stuff, and they came out and told me about that, and I told him, I said, well, you take that price support stuff and you go give somebody else and let them use it for fertilizer. I'm going to grow my own stuff, and I'm going to do it my way. Thank you very much. They still got to him, you know, some sort of allotment crud. And it just, you know, here's a guy trying to be free. And that's his only crime, is he wants to be free and do things his way. If he fails, fine. It's his failure. If he succeeds, that's fine too. It's his success. But the government ain't going to share his failure if they're the ones that shared the cause of it. So that's all of it, right down the line. These ripples keep going out and out and out. And they keep going all out into the universe. We've got an overbloated government because it's on an overbloated diet. And I know it's pot in the kettle and all that stuff, but that's different. I lose weight every now and then. They never do. Year before last, lost 40 pounds, guys. I got only 38 of it back. Now, let the government match that record. You know, I'm 2 pounds under what I was 3 years ago. Can it say that? I don't think so. But that's real simple. Get it back in the box. Liberty Works can address these other issues. Education, streets, highways. Quit telling us, how to run our lives. Quit telling our legislatures how to vote. That's supposed to be our job. See, a lot of that 56% goes back to the states. Oh, hallelujah, we're getting free money. Free my... What? It's not free. It came from us. We paid for that money, or whatever it's worth. Federal Reserve notes worth what, about 7 cents? And, so we paid for that. That's real money. They took it away from us. They stole it from us. And now we're going to beg back part of the loot. And when they do, it always comes back with strings. And when it comes back with that string, that string says, we'll give you some of the stolen money back for you to spend in your state, but you have to, there's a trick, there's a catch, you have to ignore the people of Maryland. You have to ignore the people of Louisiana. You have to ignore your constituents and the will of your people. And you're going to have to vote and pass laws that we tell you to. Everything's follow the money. If that's where they get their money from, that's who they answer to. Now imagine just for a minute, I know this is fantasy, but imagine that all that stopped. Imagine if all that money the federal government is sucking out of the room in your state stayed. You earned it all. You gave up part of your life. You gave up your labor. You gave up whatever it took to be able to learn how to do that pipe fitting or that welding or whatever it is that you do, or the legal work or whatever, selling houses. Whatever you do, you had to learn how to do that. All that was spent. Turn around now and, what are you going to do with that money? Let's take half of it. Give it to the state of Maryland. Now, half of everything that the federal government's been sucking out of this state, give that to the state of Maryland. But let them know, put a note on that. It's just from the people. And this is who you answer to for it. You're answering us again. You're back on our payroll. And you give that to Maryland. What kind of schools could they build? What kind of libraries could they build? What kind of highways would you have? What kind of, government services from the state of Maryland and the communities that it supports have? Take it another notch. What happened to the other half? Stayed in your household, didn't it? Now, that's not the bottom half of your income. That's the top piece. That's the cream. You've already got the rent paid. You've already got the light bill paid. You've already got the gas bill paid. You've already got your cable bill paid.